Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Brent Aiken.
Hey, and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, we want to welcome you and invite you over to our website, studentministryconversations.org, where you can find all of our previous episodes, show notes, blog articles, and much more. Our goal is that you are inspired, encouraged, and the things that you hear on this podcast can equip you to be a better student pastor for the church that you're serving in. And today we're sitting down and talking about how to be more creative. It's a really exciting conversation. Really glad that we had the opportunity to get Kenny on the show. Here is that episode. Hey, and welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm excited because we have the opportunity to sit down with Kenny Campbell. And I don't want to steal your thunder, man. So you have way too much for me to list going on. So why don't you tell us about yourself, what you do, and why people might know you?
Why people might know me. Hey, what's up, man? Yo, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. Love it. I used to be a youth ministry podcaster myself. It's been a while, so glad to be back on the podcast airwaves. So I'm Kenny Campbell from Buffalo, New York. Originally, I was a youth pastor there for almost 10 years, like 9.5 years or so. I worked there with my wife. We both led the middle school ministry together. So I was the middle school pastor, and Elle, my wife, came on as like our volunteers and small group coordinator. And so we just got to lead that together. It was super fun. We really enjoyed it. And basically started creating a lot of our own stuff while we were doing it. So we're both pretty creative people. We love like the Adobe suite and all that. So we just started creating our own resources, bought a website called Stuff You Can Use, started putting stuff up there, and eventually that kind of grew to a spot where we could do that full time. So that's what we do now. So my wife and I, we lead an organization called Stuff You Can Use. We create Grow Curriculum, which is a curriculum that about 10,000 churches subscribe to. And we do kids ministry and youth ministry and even adult stuff now. So we have since moved from Buffalo. We're living in Charlotte, North Carolina. And yeah, just loving life, creating resources and curriculum for church leaders, and excited to be on the show today.
Man, I just have to stop for 1 second. 10,000 churches.
It's insane, and we actually both quit our jobs on the same day. We were working for another organization at that point, and we were like, you know what, I think we should just do this ourselves. So we just started it. We had no expectations. We were like, all right, there was like what we felt was a hole in the market of like a more comprehensive and holistic resource set that included curriculum and discipleship and events and parents and volunteers. And so we were like, let's just create it and see if anybody wants it. And, if not, we could find jobs again and do something else. So we kind of just launched it, and all of a sudden people were subscribing, and we've been doing it for about 5 years now. We launched in 2017. So 5 years ago, we launched it. And now we have like a full company going. We got like 20 something employees, like full-time employees. We've got 10,000 churches subscribed to it. And we're launching new products like church database management softwares and other curriculums and devotionals and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, that's been amazing. Crazy.
Yeah. And I have, like most people that have been listening, I've been in youth ministry for 12 years now. And so I've definitely used from Stuff You Can Use when it was just a bunch of resources and stuff like that. I still to this day use the Stuff You Can Use volunteer handbook, and just fantastic stuff. And then also like one of the unspoken wonders of Kenny and Elle's brainchild is Pharisees, which I don't think y'all regularly produce anymore, but that was such a fun opportunity. And if you ever catch that in a garage sale or a church yard sale or something like that, you need to grab it.
Yeah, but, you can actually see it over my shoulder. If you look closely, you'll see a Pharisees box over with the other like black.
Oh yeah. I do see it.
We have a bunch in my garage right now. I need to like get them to our fulfillment centers, but I think this will be the last run. We have like a few more thousand of them left, and we'll just throw them up there and let them sell out. Every time we put more up, they like sell out like instantly. This is like a cult following game. So there's
Yeah,
youth
no,
ministers all
it's a
over
lot
the
of fun.
country. I get like messages every day, like, yo, do you know where I can find Pharisees? I'm like, oh, I know, I gotta get this last batch up on Amazon.
Well, I had it at my last church and I did not bring it with me. So I am one of those that has been desperately looking for probably 6 years now, trying to find one so we can have it at this church as well. But besides the point, that kind of just all kind of correlates into our conversation today. And as the listeners know, normally we ask y'all to pick your own topics. And you had a really cool one that I really, really like because A, we haven't covered it yet. And B, I think it's something that genuinely we can all do. And it's something that we can all get better at get better at. And so that our topic is how to be more creative. And so what do you exactly mean when you say that? I mean, obviously creativity is a pretty generalized term, but like, how do we be more creative? What do you mean?
Yeah, and well, I think it is extremely important as church leaders that we understand that we are creative and that we need to be creative. Because some people, they'll be like, oh, I'm not a creative person. Like, that's not for me. I'm more administrative or I'm more whatever, logical or something. But we all are creative, and creativity is really just building things and problem solving. So if you're solving problems, which we all are as church leaders, you have to be able to be creative. If you're building things or creating things like events or teaching, like trying to figure out what you're going to teach or how to connect with parents or how to support and train volunteers, you have to be creative. And even when you think about, we're made in the image of God, right? And God is known as the creator. Like, we are in his image, we are creators. And that's something that you can just see over the course of humanity. Like, we are a species that likes to build things and make things and progress. And I think as church leaders, we need to learn how to flex that muscle. And we need to know and recognize that that is part of our duty as a church leader, to be creative. And so, yeah, so today I just want to kind of talk about what you could do to be more creative and what we've learned. Elle and I, we both have kind of studied this a little bit. Study might be too much of a word. We've learned a lot about this, and we've actually done similar types of talks like this in different conferences and stuff because we're just passionate. We love helping people be creative. We love creating things ourselves. And I think as a church leader, you'll have the most fun if you can flex your creative muscles.
Well, and now a lot of people would say, though, and I think this is a generalized kind of overlook on creativity as a thing, but a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm not good with Adobe, so I'm not creative, or I'm not good, I can't draw, so I'm not creative. And I mean, obviously being creative is far more than graphic design, but I think we get into that kind of trap sometimes to where we're like, oh, I can't draw, or I can't do that. But what, in a grand scheme of things, like you said, creativity is everything. It is like building ideas from the ground up. It is establishing different mindsets and different focuses than what you've been doing in the past. And so how do we be more creative just as student pastors? How does it start?
Yeah, so I'm going to give us 6 things to think about today. And and like you said, it's more than painting. It's more than like that kind of like artsy kind of stuff. It is strategy. Like, you need to come up with a strategy of how you're going to minister to your community and how you're going to disciple your students. And all of that takes a level of creative thinking and like problem solving. So we're going to jump right into it. Number 1, this is a big one. This might be the biggest one, and the one that we could probably get like the most ROI, like the most return on investment out of, and that is getting more rest. And here's some things to think about when I talk about rest when it comes to creativity. So think about our lives right now. We are constantly going. Like, we live in this culture of like productivity where it like we are known by what we produce, right? Like, our bosses look at us, okay, what are you producing? What's your output? And we're constantly go, 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 go. And our brain is in this mode of like, okay, we need to keep going. But the brain actually is like a creative problem solving machine. And when you give it space to do that, even subconsciously, you'll be surprised at what the results are. Like, think about this. Most people talk about they have like these brilliant ideas when they're in the shower or like when they're kind of falling asleep. And that's not a coincidence. That is because when you're in the shower, you're kind of away from the distractions. You're kind of just mindlessly standing there, right? And like your brain has time to process things that you didn't give it space to process when you were in this constant productivity mode the whole rest of the day. When you're falling asleep, you're kind of like, your brain is kind of finally be able to settle down. And all of a sudden you have this idea, oh, I got to write this down. It's because your brain finally has the room to like process all these different things that happened to you that day. And it's like what happens when you sleep, and when you listen to people that talk about like the activity of the brain when you're sleeping, and like when you're in your like REM stages and all this stuff, it's actually like the brain is like processing and like making connections of things that happened. And so even like people tell you before you have a big test, it's really important for you to get like a really good night's sleep. Like it's not better to stay up all night and study. It's better to actually get a good night of sleep, because it allows your brain to actually process and make the connections of the things that you were learning and inputting into your brain all day. So it's important to have rest. And like, I even think back to myself, some of the like most important ideas I've ever had were either when I was driving on like a 13-hour road trip, or when I was like on vacation. And these are kind of like when the big like life turning ideas have kind of come into my brain. And so some things that I think that we could do as youth pastors is just like take some intentional time throughout the day to allow your brain to rest. And another big thing, I was lucky as a young like intern at a church, and then that became like creative director for the youth ministry, and that eventually became the youth pastor. But my family pastor, my boss, told me like, hey, do not work more than 40 hours a week. Like I am capping you at 40 hours. I want you to be able to go home. I want you to be able to rest. I want you to be able to spend time with your family. Like do not overwork yourself, for a couple of reasons. One of them is because you're going to get burned out. And the second one is because you have to have a healthy life. Like you can't be unhealthy and be able to serve at your best capacity. So I think if we intentionally kind of put our work down, and then even during the day, we intentionally take breaks during the day. I love to just like get out and like go get in the car and just drive to like go get lunch and like go somewhere. I hate being like cooped up in the same place or like whatever. I just need, my brain needs to get in a different situation to rest for a minute, and then I can recoup and come back. So I think as church leaders, we need to think about how we're treating our body, if we're giving our brains enough space and enough rest for us to actually be the most creative and to have our best problem solving abilities going for us.
Well, and I think that's a pretty significant moment, because I think a lot of times, even in my life, I look back and it's like, oh, well, hey, I'm going to go sit at this coffee shop, but I don't allow myself to just be chill at the coffee shop. I'm either talking to people, or I am trying to work, or I'm trying to do something else, or I'm trying to, like we have this kind of tenacity is not the right word, but we have this kind of knack for filling even our rest moments with as much productivity as possible. And I love the concept of like, our best ideas come from the shower. I mean, that's something we've all heard, but in the grand scheme of things, like you said, it's just because we don't have anything else to do. And so it is a very mundane task that just is a repeated process that we're all aware of. And it's kind of the lapse in brain thought, I guess, where like, it's just the repetitive task that you do every day so you can do it without thinking.
And it's easy. Good. It's easy to make the adjustment. Like go take a walk every day. Just like literally go take a 20-minute walk. Get up from your desk or wherever you are. I mean, a lot of us are working from home now. I'm thinking more, when I was a youth pastor, I was like literally at the church every day, but I don't even know if that's how it's working these days. But like just get out of the house or get out of your office, take a walk, take a nap. Oh my gosh, I love naps. And actually a funny anecdote, Winston Churchill, like during the World War, that he was like, overseeing his country, he would take naps every single day during the war. And like his staff was like, yo, what are you doing? Like, this is not the time to take naps. And he's like, yo, I need to take naps because this is going to allow me to be my best. And so I just think that was like a really interesting tidbit. And so, yeah. I love it. Find and be intentional, because if we're not intentional about it, we're never going to do it, because it's just natural for us to keep going. And like you said, even in our moments of rest, we're throwing in headphones and listening to podcasts, or we're like flicking through TikTok or whatever we're doing, right? So like you have to intentionally sometimes put everything down and rest, and maybe figure out if like meditation is a good practice for you, or figure out like what will help you just like let your brain rest for a few minutes, even during the day.
No, that's awesome. So obviously, if we want to be creative, get more rest, what is number two?
Yeah, number two, if you want to be creative, learn more stuff. And so when I talk about learning more stuff, there's this phrase called expert generalist. Have you ever heard this phrase before?
I don't
Okay,
think I have.
expert generalist. And what an expert generalist is someone who knows a little bit about a lot of different things. And there's been a lot of studies talking about how like expert generalists happen to be some of the most creative people and some of the most successful people that are out there. When you can learn a lot or learn a little bit about a lot of different things, that's going to just give you a lot more things to work from. So creativity at its core is basically the combination of two existing ideas coming together. You can think about anything that's like creative, right? Let's just say, like, for instance, Steve Jobs creating the iPhone. It's not like he came up with this idea for a phone that is like a web browser and has like a touch screen out of thin air. No, those things all existed. He was just combining them together for the first time and creating something new out of an existing foundation of knowledge that he already had. And I think sometimes as youth pastors and like church leaders, sometimes we get stuck in like this ministry bubble where the podcasts we listen to are all other church leaders. The things we watch on YouTube are sermons from our favorite pastors. The books we're reading are all from other Christian leaders. And we kind of get in this Christian thought bubble sometimes. And I think like we would serve ourselves and our churches and our people better if we actually intentionally expanded what we were learning. Instead of just listening to the same podcasts and YouTube channels or whatever you're doing every day, intentionally go out, find some new topics to learn about. Maybe it's economics. There's podcasts like Planet Money, which are amazing and informative. And I've learned so many things. And like you can take so many anecdotes from these podcasts and put them into sermons and messages as like illustrations and stuff. There's so much to learn, so much that you could use. So you can learn about economics, you can learn about science, you can learn about history, you can intentionally learn about different cultures, like indigenous cultures. Just read a book that was all about the indigenous cultures of Mexico from their perspective during like the mass like colonization, or like I'm reading a book right now that's written by Asian Americans and talking about the history of Asian Americans. And so just like learning from other people's perspectives, learning about different topics, it's just going to give you so much more to work from when you're trying to be creative. And so even when we're like, we have a curriculum company, and when we're thinking of like events to do or illustrations to put in messages or ways to encourage your volunteers, like, man, we're pulling from all sorts of different sources and different ideas and reading different books, listening to different TED Talks. There's like so many different experts out there in the world that we can take little tidbits of knowledge from and make those like really important pieces of how we're ministering to people and how we're connecting to people. And so, I would just encourage youth pastors out there to not get stuck in like the same influence bubble that maybe you're in. And it's easy to get into because we like to listen to things that we like to listen to, but to like challenge yourself to explore other topics and to learn more things and become more of an expert generalist. And at least I found in my own life, and just from reading about this whole idea of being an expert generalist, I think it's super valuable as a person, like just to develop who you are and to be a more well-rounded, more well-educated, and just kind of like understanding the world in a greater way. If you can intentionally learn about a lot of different things and from a lot of different perspectives.
No, that's good. And the thing is I think, I guess a way to say that in a way, I guess that's more commonly used, almost jack of all trades, to that kind of mindset of like a lot of things, but you're not a master of any of them. And so that's okay though. I mean, because in the grand scheme of things, I think it's like you said, it's super beneficial to learn as much as you can, but it doesn't mean that you have to be a master or savant level in understanding in everything that you do. And so, but you can implement, like you said, I mean, and that's one of the things that was really, really cool about Grow when we used it for a while was the aspects of like the illustrations, some of the stuff that you'd pull in. It was like, wait, where did they get this kind of thing like that? But I mean, it's just creativity. When you can find the opportunity for stories and stuff like that. I ran across a youth pastor one time that he had a Dropbox folder on his computer, and he had like every emotional topic, every sermon topic under the sun. And anytime he'd see a news article, he'd print it as a PDF on his computer, and then he'd save it in those Dropbox folders. And then he could come back, and anytime he was doing any kind of sermon topic or anything, he'd just find that sermon topic and he'd have new articles to be using regularly and throwing in.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I love that idea. I love that idea. And like, okay, so you mentioned jack of all trades. And I would even say, so jack of all trades, yes, in a way, but the goal is actually not to be a jack of all trades, but the goal is actually to be an amazing youth pastor, if that's what you are. We're talking to youth pastors here, to be the best youth pastor that you could possibly be. And I think being an expert generalist will allow you to be the best possible youth pastor that you could be. So when I hear the phrase jack of all trades, I think, okay, really not good at anything. Well, good at a lot of things, but not great at anything. But I think the whole goal is here to be great as a youth pastor.
Yeah.
And the more you learn, the better of a youth pastor you will be. And I'm almost getting into different points. I wanted to say something, but I'll save it for another point.
Okay. Well, this obviously good stuff. But number three,
if you want to be creative, steal more stuff. And when you hear steal, you might be like, oh my gosh, she's telling me to steal. That's not good. Isn't that like bad? You're not supposed to steal. Is that like plagiarism? Let me tell you about stealing things. And we already talked about this a little bit, right? Where like creativity is the combining of existing ideas. Like sometimes I think that's where we get into this place where we feel like we're not creative, is when we think creativity is something that it's not. We think creativity is coming up with ideas out of thin air, and that's not what it is. It is combining what already exists and like seeing what exists and taking it and making it better, or making it fit your context, or changing it and remixing it some way. So when I say to be more creative, you need to steal more stuff. I'm talking about doing it in a way that is honoring. And there's actually an awesome book by shoot, I don't have it here in front of me. Wait, hold on, let me go down. Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And so I highly recommend checking out that book called Steal Like an Artist, and it'll kind of unpack all these different ideas I'm about to tell you. But here's what this book talks about theft. And there's good theft and there's bad theft, okay? So here's some examples of good theft versus bad theft when we're talking about creativity. Good theft honors the original idea. Bad theft degrades it. So when you're taking other people's ideas, are you honoring those ideas or are you degrading them? Good theft studies the idea and the topic. Bad theft just skims it. So you don't really have a knowledge of it. You're just kind of taking it and using it and not really understanding what you're saying. So are you studying these ideas that you're stealing, or are you actually skimming them and kind of taking them? Good theft steals from many. Bad theft steals from one. So when you're building this idea, are you just finding one person taking their idea and ripping it off? Or are you taking like a collection of ideas, kind of using little bits and pieces of all of these to create something new? Good theft credits, bad theft plagiarizes. That's an easy one. Good theft transforms, bad theft imitates, good theft remixes, bad theft rips off. So it is totally cool to steal ideas from people. And even we say at Grow, you could steal all of our ideas. We have like an entire strategy for 6 different areas of your ministry that we've developed, from like discipleship teaching, events, programming, volunteers, families. And we unpack those every single year in a free video to kind of show you what our strategy for the upcoming volume is. And please steal it, take it, use all these ideas and use them in your ministry if you want to. If you don't want to buy the curriculum, if you buy it, we'll give you all the resources, but you can take all the ideas for free. And the same thing, as you're watching like Life Church do what they're doing, or you're watching your favorite ministries, how they're ministering to people and how they're connecting to communities and how they're developing their strategies for influencing parents to have influencing kids or whatever it might be. Feel free to steal those ideas, but when you do it, either remix it, credit them, take from a bunch of sources, but just don't plagiarize and kind of make it your own. There's been people in the past, there's someone actually who have taken one of our resources from How to Grow or Stuff You Can Use before, changed the color of it, and then uploaded it to their website or blog one time and was kind of trying to say it was theirs. That's bad theft. You don't want to do that. Don't plagiarize. If you're going to take something, properly format it and remix it to fit your specific context. And if you're going to put something out there that's exactly word for word someone else, then make sure you say that. There's already been pastors that have been called out for stealing other people's sermons and stuff. It's cool if you do that, but just make sure that you properly credit them and let the people know, here's where I'm getting these ideas from. But you can totally take existing ideas and remix them and make them work in your own context without feeling like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. Well, and in the grand scheme of things, I mean, the podcast that you're listening to right now is essentially stealing other ideas. When we sat down with the idea of hey, we need to start a podcast, we were like, well, man, we don't know all the topics, kind of thing like that. We don't have this overabounding wisdom of youth ministry, even though Russell and I have both been in youth ministry for a while, but it was how can we be a benefit to other people? And it was well, let's just let others come on the show and share their brilliance with everyone. And that was the whole premise behind the podcast. Almost none of the content on our podcast is actually our content. It's not our materials. We are honoring and highlighting other people that know how to do ministry well in specific areas. And it's been really, really cool because when I started this thing with Russell, we had no idea. I mean, we've had, you're going to be episode 82 or 83. And so when we started this, we had no idea, A, that we'd make it to 80 episodes, B, that we would go 78 episodes in without having a recurring guest. And then on top of that, we have maybe had 3 repeat topics out of 80 something different episodes, which has been super, super cool. But it's one of those things that when we started, we were just how, we're just going to have 70 lessons on student leadership. But I think that's been the best thing about this. And it's been the most enriching for us is when we ask y'all, what do y'all want to talk about? Y'all present the idea. And it's not, hey, let's talk about this instead. And we've had some topics that we would have never, ever thought about doing. And it's all just using other people's ideas and thoughts.
Love it. Yeah. You're a curator of ideas, which I love. Dude, great work. Congratulations on the podcast. How many, 80 episodes strong, dude, you're killing it. I love it.
So number 4.
All right. Yeah. So far, if you want to be creative, get more rest. If you want to be creative, learn more stuff. If you want to be creative, steal more stuff. And then number 4, if you want to be creative, ask more questions. And Albert Einstein said this: I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious. Now, I think he's being a little self-deprecating there. I think he has some special talents, but I think there's other people that probably had similar talents to him. But the reason why he was so successful and was able to make such breakthroughs was because of his passion for curiosity. I mean, imagine this dude must have been asking every single question, why is this way? Why does this work? Does this formula work here? How does he was just constantly curious to try to figure out what and how does this universe operate? And I think that passion for curiosity is kind of what drove him to the success that he had. And there's this guy named Brian Grazer. Have you ever heard of Brian Grazer? He's a movie and TV producer.
I don't think so.
He's one of the most successful producers of all time. He's produced some incredible things that we're all familiar with, Friday Night Lights, Apollo 13, 8 Mile. Is it 8 Mile? Is that
Oh wow,
the
that is a
Eminem one?
yeah. That 8 Miles is the Eminem one, but
Yeah,
man, that's a diverse list right there.
Exactly. It's super diverse. Arrested Development. He was the producer of that. He was the producer of just like a Beautiful Mind. Just like some really, really crazy. He won like an Academy Award for that. He's like been a producer for the Da Vinci Code, for like all sorts of stuff. This dude is like one of the most successful producers of all time, and very, very eclectic, like you said, and like a very different variety of different kinds of movies and shows,
Yeah,
like comedies and dramas and like biographical like movies like 8 Mile, all this stuff, right? And so he and like Apollo 13, just working with like the most incredible people, making the most incredible stuff. And he has a book called A Curious Mind. And he talks about in this book how he intentionally, every week, I think for a while, he was doing these, what he called curiosity conversations. And so he would call up somebody that he didn't know, but was like an expert in their field. So for instance, one of them was like the chief police of the LA Police Department where he was living. And he's like, hey, I just want to learn about what you do. Like, I just want to hear your perspective, your story. Tell me about your job. Tell me like what makes you successful at what you do. These are just the kind of things he wants to know, because he's so passionately curious, because he knows like we talked about, being an expert generalist. When he knows all these different things, that's going to inform new ideas for movies he might want to make or shows he might want to make, right? So he talks about having these curiosity conversations every single week with different people, and how it just helped him to be like one of the most successful producers of all time. And so I'm sitting there thinking, this is so applicable to ministry as well. Imagine as a youth pastor, you intentionally had conversations with a teen counselor that's in your area. I don't know anything, honestly, I didn't go to school for teen counseling. I don't know anything about teen counseling, but how important would it be for me to understand at least a little bit of what a teen counselor does? So like going to your local public school and being like, hey, they're like counselors or people here that I could, set up a lunch meeting with or something. Or like, what about like a digital marketer in your area? Find somebody who's like a professional digital marketer and sit down with them and be like, hey, what are you learning? What's like the most important things about marketing to teenagers these days? Like just trying to learn things from people in your local area that you can sit down and have conversations with. And like even these days, I find all my information from like Facebook groups. Like if I'm trying to learn something new, I instantly join a Facebook group and I ask a question in there. I'm like, okay, for instance, I was like getting a new credit card recently. And so I'm like, I don't know, I want one that has like good rewards on it and all this stuff. So I joined like a credit card rewards Facebook group and just started asking them questions. So like we have so many opportunities available to us to ask questions to people, whether it's in person in your local community or online in some kind of like mastermind group or Facebook group or whatever it might be. I think as youth pastors, if we are not intentionally seeking out experts and asking them questions, we are doing ourselves a disservice. And you think about the job of a youth pastor. This is why I loved being a youth pastor so much. It was such a like fun job, and like you could take it in a million different directions. You had to be good at marketing because you have to be able to reach people. If you're going to have an event or something coming up and you want to like get the word out, you're going to need to know how to market. You had to be like an event planner. You have to like put on these different things. You have a program you have to actually produce every single week. It's almost like you're like a talk show host. You have to like be a game planner and like a game creator or whatever. If you're going to do that kind of like fun stuff, like you have to learn all these different skills. You have to be a public speaker. Every single week, you're going up in front of people and you're delivering a message to them. So maybe it would be worth your time to actually find people who are like professional public speakers or who travel and give presentations and ask them, hey, what kind of tools are you using? How do you prepare your messages that you speak? Like just learning how to refine what we do, asking questions from people, trying to like get better at all the different little aspects. You could probably identify like 30 different jobs that a youth pastor has. You have to be able to train volunteers. You have to be able to connect with parents. You have to, like, there's so much you have to be able to do. They're asking, like, and a lot of these people, they're, you know, when I started in youth ministry, I was in my young 20s. I was like a youth pastor probably by like 23 or something like that, you know? So it's like, man, I have no experience. I'm not a parent. I don't know anything. So it would definitely serve me well to start asking questions. And even now, as more of a grown adult, and there's people that have been in youth ministry way longer than me, I think any of us would benefit by learning and asking more questions. So if you want to be more creative, ask more questions.
Yeah, and I think the other element of that as well is I love listening to people's stories. And it's not necessarily asking a question other than like, hey, tell me about your life, kind of thing like that. But you hear so many different dynamics and so many different opportunities for growth as well through just people's stories. And so that's one of my favorite things to learn about new students, new volunteers, new people in our church, just people that I come in contact in general, is just having this mindset of like, the more people you can meet, the more ideas tend to rub off as well. Because you meet people. I've had a bunch of cool different volunteers in my program over the years, but one of my volunteers or one of the staff members at the time with me right now, like her husband worked in the Pentagon. And
Yeah.
it was just like, I would have never known that. Like, and I asked their daughter, which was in my group at the time, I was like, hey, so like your dad was in the Air Force. What did he do? And I was like, what's your favorite memory? And like, she was like, oh, hands down, it's getting to watch 4th of July fireworks on the roof of the Pentagon. And it was just like, what?
That's
kind of thing like that.
incredible. And and that's amazing. Like similarly, now you know like the connections that you have.
Yeah.
And eventually you might want to be like, hey, I have a question that maybe your dad can answer or something, right? Like I
Yeah.
remember we had an engineer as a volunteer in our youth group, and I would just be asking him all the time, like, hey, if I was going to create this thing, like, how do you think we should create it? Like even talking to an engineer, you would never think that would like have any effect on how I do youth ministry. But when I'm thinking about creating like a fun game or an illustration or something for our environment that takes a little bit of engineering, he was my go-to guy. So yeah, you can learn all sorts of stuff from people from all different walks.
Yeah, well, and like you said, the more people you know, the more questions you ask, the more opportunities for involvement from them that you have. Had a volunteer in our high school that was a game warden for the state of Texas. I was like, hey, so I want to do this fishing trip kind of thing. And he was like, okay. He was like, and we lived just south of the largest man-made lake in Texas at the time. And he took us to the spillway, which was restricted area. Only game wardens could go back there. And he let us fish off the dam. And like where no one else is ever able to go to and stuff like that. And like, we made this amazing trip out of me just knowing that he was a game warden and he loved to fish. And I was like, oh, well, that would be cool. Like, why don't we do that? And he took it above and beyond and went way farther than I would have ever dreamed it going. But yeah, asking questions can lead to some tremendous benefits.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. That's even beyond creativity. Yeah, you're right. You can get all sorts of benefits just from asking questions and finding things out.
So we've gone through 4. What is number 5?
All right, 5, which this kind of leads to the next thing which is if you want to be creative, involve more people. So sometimes we try to do everything ourselves. And this is what I did as a young youth pastor myself, right? I was like leading the games. I was leading worship. I was giving the message. I was supposed to be developing these volunteers. I was supposed to be like doing everything. And pretty soon I figured out that I wasn't good at everything and I couldn't do everything. All of a sudden our volunteers weren't showing up regularly because I was not doing a good job investing in them. And there's all sorts of things that probably could have been better. And so eventually what we started to do was involving more people because we can't do it and we don't have the skill set to do it ourselves. And even when we were like creating Grow, so we identified like 6 areas of ministry, right? And I mentioned those, which are like discipleship, teaching, programming, events, volunteers, and families. And as a church leader, you cannot be great at all of those things. It's almost impossible. So you're going to need people to help you. You're like what we did in our ministry is Elle came on to help specifically with the volunteers and the small groups. But when you bring more people on, even if it's just in the ideation of what you're doing, you're getting more perspective, you're getting different ideas, you're getting more thoughts, different life experiences. And so some of the things I would do as a youth pastor is when I was planning my message for the week, I would text all of our volunteers and be like, hey, this week we're talking about whatever it was. Let's just say honesty. Was there ever a time in any of your lives where like you told a lie and like it had bad consequences? So, I'm just like texting our volunteers this and they're shooting back all these stories and all these things. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. I'm going to use that one in the message. Oh, can I bring you up on stage? Do you want to tell the story? And so now I'm like involving all these people, bringing in all these different ideas, and it just makes my message so much more engaging, so much more just better for students to listen to, instead of me just taking my life experience every single week and telling it to them. If I can incorporate different people's ideas and different people's perspectives, it's going to make everything more engaging. And like, I'm just one person. There's going to be people that have different personalities than me that are going to connect to other people better than they connect to me. There's just going to be in general, people that want to hear from more people than just you. So it's good to kind of get more people involved. And then the other thing I'll say too about involving more people is what we would do is every single week, we would have like a programming meeting to just make sure that we knew what we were doing leading up to like, we did our middle school ministry stuff on Sunday mornings. So like every Thursday we would have a programming meeting, and I would invite all of our like really involved volunteers to come to this meeting every week. And so what we would do is we would talk through every single aspect of the service together. There's probably like a group of like 8 to 10 of us. And so we would talk about like, hey, here's the worship songs that we're going to play this week. Here's the message. Here's the game. Here's the questions in the small group. And just as like a group together, kind of looking at it, like seeing if anybody has any ideas, any red flags, like, hey, I think this question might, lead to some topics we don't want to go down to, or like we might be making kids uncomfortable with this specific worship song because of the lyrics in here or whatever, right? So we would kind of look at the program together, and it just made what we did so much better because we had more people looking at it and more insight than just me and just like one person. So if you want to be creative, if you want to be successful, if you want to be able to minister as well as possible, I highly encourage you to involve more people and don't try to do it just on your own. Even if it's a parent, a volunteer, somebody who you can just bounce ideas off of and just include in the brainstorming process, I highly, highly encourage you to involve more people in your planning and your strategy for what you're doing.
Yeah, so I think this is probably in my mind one of the most powerful of the 6 that you are going to be talking about. But this also leads me to the question, if you had to narrow it down to one thing that was really, really cool that came out of letting someone else kind of take charge, what would that be? Like one of the coolest things that you were just like, oh man, that wasn't my idea at all, but this absolutely killed it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's probably been a million times that this has happened. I think like one of the coolest things for me, so this is also something that I believe in, is sometimes as church leaders, we value excellence too much. And like, it's good to value excellence. That's like definitely a value of mine, and it's a value of our company for sure. But sometimes as church leaders, if we value it too much, we sacrifice the involvement of other people. And here's what I mean. Like, maybe I was the best communicator out of anybody that was available in our ministry, out of like the volunteers and whatever.
Sure.
But what I intentionally did was allow other people to communicate. And so, and when we were, and when you use a curriculum, and not everyone uses curriculum, and that's fine, but when you use a curriculum, that actually makes it really easy, because you can just kind of give them that week and then walk with them through like, okay, here's kind of what it looks like. And I'm going to hand this to you and you get to deliver the message. And to me, that was like one of the coolest things, is building this like farm team of volunteers and different people who could actually deliver the message every week, because it gave people, like, as church leaders, Ephesians 4:12, right? We're supposed to be equipping the saints to do the work of the ministry. That's what we're called to do. We're not
Yeah.
called to create the best program. We're not called to do everything ourselves. We're called to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So I think like that was the most fulfilling thing to me, was to actually hand off ministry opportunities to other people and not
Sure.
take them all for myself. So seeing, and we would get like, young college kids, even high school kids, sometimes the opportunity to lead games, to give the message, to, even if they're not giving the full message, come up and like be a part of an illustration or share their story. So I just loved giving people the microphone. That was like one of my most favorite things to do, give them that experience, give them a taste for what it looks like to actually do something in a program. And then, even beyond, for like our small group leaders and stuff, we would empower them so much, because we want them to do the work of the ministry. It shouldn't just all be on the back of the youth pastor. And then eventually, when I ended up leaving that church, we left it in such a great place because it didn't rely on me. I was like not an important piece of this ministry. Like, sure, I was like leading the vision, but like me stepping out didn't bring the ministry to a halt. It kept going because we had delegated and had empowered and given the work of the ministry to the people of the church. And so yeah, I mean, there's like, to answer your question about ideas and stuff, like, man, that happened like all the time, every day. But like my favorite thing about involving more people was just allowing them to do ministry and facilitating that for them. And I think too many times we think we're the professional like church leader, and we like, it's our job to actually do the work of the ministry. It's not our job. Our job is to facilitate ministry opportunities for other people so that they can begin to own their faith. Our like lead pastor, part of his doctorate, he did this study, like what led to people having like the strongest faith and like the strongest relationship with Jesus. And like the top two things were serving and what was the other one? It was serving. Shoot, I don't even remember what the other one was off the top of my head, but I just remember the serving one because like, that was such a passion of ours. Like, okay, we need to stop hogging all the ministry opportunities and allow other people to do it so they can take more ownership and they can grow stronger in their own faith rather than just like getting all of the information from us and then going home.
Yeah.
So like providing opportunities for people to do the work of the ministry, I think is so important.
No, that, yeah, 100%. Last spring, I had the idea. I was like, what would it look like if I just literally let the high school teach every single week? And I have a group of about 20 high school. And so I was like, hey, are y'all interested? And no kidding, we meet for 16, I think we met for 16 weeks in the spring semester, and students taught 14 of them. And it was really, really cool. And it very, very much shifted the dynamic of my job because, like you said, we're supposed to be equipping. So I wasn't preparing a lesson each week. I was like, hey, send me what you're talking about. I want to help you work through this. And I want you to be as best as you can be by the time that you deliver it on Wednesday. And it was awesome. It led to some really, really great conversations. It led to kids in our group texting the person that talked for like the following week, asking questions about their topic and stuff like that. And the thing is once again, when you involve more people, you're getting skill sets and you're getting opportunities that you don't do yourself. But then the other glorious side of it is you don't have to do everything by yourself. And like you said, it's easy to fall into as far as a trap. But man, that's a real fast way to burn out too. When you feel like you have to be the person that does everything. So
I love that. I love that. Just the what happened afterwards as kids are texting each other about what they're talking about, man, you're getting so much more involvement, so much more engagement in like the actual message and topics. There's just so much plus side to allowing people to do more of the ministry work.
Sure.
Like so I mentioned I led the middle school ministry, and I kind of used the middle school ministry of our church as the training grounds for like all the other ministries, right? We would have middle school kids running our tech booth. We would have middle school kids doing the lights. We would have middle school kids and high school kids up there hosting, welcoming people, leading the games at the doors, running the cafe. We were just trying to give as much of it to as many kids as possible, because the excellence, okay, so the excellence goes down, right? They're not going to be the best at it. Sometimes the slides aren't going to move fast enough in the worship songs. Sometimes, things are going to be all weird, messed up, but they're out there learning and they're gaining skills. And like, for me, that was like so fun to allow kids to go through that process, and other like volunteers and stuff, give them opportunities to do things that, it's just a really fulfilling way to lead ministry. And you're right, it definitely leads to less burnout.
Well, and just like you said at the beginning of our conversation about ROI and having a good ROI, the thing is like the ROI when I'm not teaching seems to be tenfold. And it sounds terrible, but like when I teach, I might have a conversation with one or two students, but it really seems like they are so much more supportive because they see the challenge themselves of getting up in front of their peers and speaking, and let alone actually giving a message. Because I told them, I was like, hey, you're not going to get up there for 5 minutes and just kind of say like, Jesus is this, amen. I was like, I want you to have thought. I want you to have input. I want you to have significance. I taught them, if you've read the Communicating for a Change, Andy Stanley, I taught them the me, we, God, you, we method of preparing a lesson. I made them walk through that and all this stuff. In the grand scheme of things, like their return on investment, or the return on investment for the ministry alone was a significant increase when I allowed them to step up and them to be the ones that were actually giving the message. And it was just really, really cool for me at the same time, because I think that's our job as youth pastors, like you said, is to equip people. Our job isn't to be the person. We are supposed to be equipping the other people so they can go out and do it in their own lives. And that was a very, very unique semester. My pride jumped in a few times where I was like, man, I need to be teaching, kind of thing like that. But it was one of those things that was like, dude, shut up, pride. Like, this is like the best thing ever. Don't squash this. And I mean, they took it and ran with it. It was a super awesome opportunity. And I was super proud of the group. Like I said, 14 kids, different kids, all teaching, which was really, really neat. So we are down to number 6. Kenny, what is number 6?
Here we go. The final one, number 6. Number 6, if you want to be creative, take more risks. Now, sometimes risk is scary for people. For me personally, I'm like a risk taker. It's more like thrilling for me than anything. For some people, not as much, but I think it's important for us to intentionally and strategically, don't make decisions that are risky that will like potentially make you lose your job, not that kind of risk, but I'm talking risks creatively. So for instance, at Google in the early days, when they were like still kind of building what they were and what they did, they had this division called the Moonshots division. And I think whatever it was, something like 30% of your time could be worked on whatever you want. You get to choose what you work on and like take a risk, try to build something new. And that's how like Gmail started. Like some of their like biggest products started through this Moonshot program where people could just do random ideas and just work on them and see what happens. And that's cool. I used to love that as a youth pastor. I would be coming up with all sorts of different ideas and try them out and just see. Like I remember we like built this big like prayer wall one time and like tried it out to see if the kids would engage with it. We built like this library for parents and volunteers and stocked it with different books that we thought would be helpful for them as parents and volunteers and, working with teenagers. And we just like would be constantly coming up with ideas and trying them and seeing if people engage with them. And if they did, all right, let's keep going. If they didn't, okay, we tried it. Let's pivot to the next thing. And so I think sometimes we get stuck and like, oh, I don't know if people are going to like this, or I don't know if people are going to want to do this. Well, hey, just try it. The worst thing that could happen is you learn something, and you learn like, okay, the way we did this, or what we did, or how we executed it didn't work. So then next time I'm going to be able to do it better. I'm going to have a more refined idea. And like, sometimes we think like all of our ideas have to be the best ideas, where they really don't. I am a huge fan, even like in our own company, of like trying things, seeing if people like it, and if not, then pivoting. And so, yeah, failure is actually awesome because you get to learn so much. So if you want to be someone who's constantly learning, go ahead and fail a bunch, because you're going to get a lot of data every time you fail. That's going to inform how you do things the next time. And by the end of like, you know, if you're in youth ministry for the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to look back 5 years earlier and be like, wow, I'm thankful I tried that, because now I'm doing it in a different way. And it's so important and effective for our ministry. And so, yeah, there's something called the sunk cost fallacy that I'm like a big fan of, where we think if we start something, or if we put a lot of energy into it, that we have to keep doing it. And that is the sunk cost fallacy. If you ever get to a point where you're trying something out and you're realizing that it's not going well, you have permission to abandon it and stop. And like, some people don't like to do that because they think it like makes them look bad, or like hurts their reputation or something. But the sunk cost fallacy is that we need to keep putting more energy and effort into this thing that is failing, because we've already put so much energy and effort into it up to this point. And if we stop now, it's just going to be a waste of all of our time and money or whatever. But actually, the waste of your time and money is to keep going with an idea that you know is not working and that is failing. So it's important for us to try things, to see if they work, and then to pivot to something else. And I think like ministry is such a cool place to be able to try things. We have like such cool opportunities in front of us to reach kids in new ways, to engage communities in new ways. We can do all sorts. There's a million ideas to be had as far as ministry goes. And I think, at least for me, part of the fun of being a pastor was like trying new ways to reach people and to connect with people and to minister to people.
Yeah, no, and this honestly goes hand in hand with an episode that we just did, episode 79. We had a guy by the name of Brian Wallace on, and he lives up in Pittsburgh, but his whole topic and whole concentration for his episode was the art of experimenting well. And I think one of the things that kind of goes with the sunken cost fallacy is the mindset of maybe you just need to build parameters on what you're trying. So if you're going to try a new small group, or if you're going to try this new opportunity, maybe you put a timetable on it and say, hey, you know, we've never done small groups on Sundays. We've always met on Wednesdays. We're going to try this for 6 weeks.
Yes.
And then if it goes well, then you keep going. If it flops miserably, you're only tied to it for 6 weeks. And so you already have kind of that built-in factor to avoid hopefully getting to that fallacy of like, oh man, well, we've already invested in this, we have to keep going. It's like, no, we're investing in this for 6 weeks, do or die. And then after that, we'll decide the future of it. So very, very good stuff. I think this is one that a lot of people, well, I think number 6 is probably the one that most people listening to, they're either like, oh yeah, this is a great one, or this one absolutely terrifies me. And there's really not any area in between. It's a black and white policy. But the big issue with this is I think a lot of people, especially in youth pastors, and I think we've all seen this, is there's a lot of youth pastors in churches that are like, oh, if I take risks, like I'm going to lose my job. Like, I mean, the church is not
what kind of risk
gonna,
we're talking about here.
yeah.
Don't do
But,
anything
like,
stupid.
yeah. So, but no, I love it. I like the sunk cost fallacy. I'd never heard that before. But man, is that not true? How many times have we kept doing something because we started it when in all reality it should have lasted a week or two, and then we should have killed it because it was such a terrible thing.
Well, setting parameters is such a great idea. I love that idea because like you said, right? Okay, we're going to do this for 6 weeks. And then you have a built-in end so that if it didn't go well, it's not like and like this might help you even for your own like worries, right? It doesn't make you look as bad. You're like, hey, we're going to do this for 6 weeks. So when we stop it, I'm not a failure. Like some people are so scared of failing that they don't try things, So if
Yeah.
you set parameters around it, that will give you an out so that you never technically failed. You just ended it and you realize it didn't work good. And now we're going to try something else next time.
Yeah, very, very much. And I think a lot of fear comes into this element of like we're so fearful of not doing a good job, like you said, that we're too scared to try something that might fail because everything else is going good, or we don't want to risk the opportunity of failure. And it can really, really be devastating to your entire group because you might be on the verge of a really good idea that never comes to light because you were too scared to try it. So, well, that is all 6. Kenny, can you go over all 6 of them one more time, just as a brief recap? Just hit the titles and go from there, and then we'll kind of close up.
Absolutely. All right. So here's the deal. If you want to be creative, here's 6 things. They're not the only things. This isn't a comprehensive list. This is just to get you started. If you want to be more creative, get more rest. Give your brain an opportunity to actually do some of that problem solving for you. If you want to be creative, learn more stuff. You need to open up where you're learning from. Don't just get stuck in the same bubble and the same loop. You got to go out and search for different topics to learn about. If you want to be creative, steal more stuff. As you're learning things, don't be afraid to actually take ideas and implement them in your ministry. Steal those ideas, treat them with respect and honor, and implement them in your ministry. If you want to be creative, ask more questions. There are so many experts and people with experience around you. You need to be taking advantage of them and asking questions and learning from them. Number 5, if you want to be creative, involve more people. You can't do this by yourself. You are not talented. I am not talented to run an entire ministry by myself. You need more people to help you if you want to be as good as it possibly can be. And if you want to be creative, take more risks. Don't get stuck in your just safe zone doing the same thing all the time. You got to switch it up. You got to take risks if you want to reach people the most effectively. Culture's changing all the time. We need to start learning and taking risks and trying to figure out how to reach this next generation as best as possible.
No, and that's fantastic. So last 2 things I have for you, Kenny. Thank you for being on the show. Do you have anything else to kind of close out your thoughts on the whole idea, or are you pretty much good on what you've covered?
I'm pretty good, man.
Okay. And then finally, obviously, they can find you through stuff you can use and grow and everything else. But if people wanted to reach out to you and maybe ask a question or anything like that, what are the best ways to get in touch with you? And then also, do y'all have anything coming down the pipeline? We kind of do at the end of our episodes, kind of let y'all shine and promote whatever y'all have going on that people can be excited for or go check out themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You could feel free to send me an email. That's probably the easiest way to get at me. It's kenny@stuffyoucanuse.org. I'm on Instagram. You can find me. You can message me on Facebook or Instagram. All that stuff works too. But I definitely am checking my emails every day. And then what we have coming up, man, I am just so excited. So we're currently in volume 6 of Grow. Like I mentioned, we've got like 10,000 churches now that are subscribed to us. And then we're moving forward to volume 7. We're already pretty much like editing everything for the next release in May of 2023. And so I'm just pumped for that. So you can go to growcurriculum.org, get a free sample. You can check out whether you're a youth pastor or a kids pastor or, with other ministries. You can check out what we're doing. We give you a free sample of our teaching. You get a free teaching series. You get a free discipleship activity, free resource for parents and volunteers, and just kind of get an idea of what Grow Curriculum is all about. And the last thing I'll say is the Stuff You Can Use, a youth ministry community Facebook group. If you're not a part of that, I forget how many, I want to say like 40,000 or so.
There's a lot.
Yeah. Like the stuff that I learn in that group is incredible. Every single day, you get to see youth pastors and youth leaders from all over the world, honestly, asking questions, giving advice to each other, encouraging each other. It is such a great community, and there's plenty of Facebook groups. Get plugged into a youth ministry Facebook group if you haven't. But I really like the Stuff You Can Use one because that's the one that I'm a part of. But it's just a really great place to learn and connect and build community, and just to get ideas from other people doing the same thing that you're doing.
Yeah, and honestly, if you want to check out Grow more, like Kenny said, you can check them out, but you can actually also help both of us in that process too, as we are an affiliate partner with Grow. Back to when Elle was on our podcast way back when. And so you can actually go to studentministryconversations.org/grow, and it'll take you directly to their website as well. And then that way you still get the awesome content from Kenny and Elle, and you said team of 20 now, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Team of 20 that work really, really hard at putting everything together, so you don't really have to. And then also the mindset of you can also support us if you are a active listener and you love the content on this show. You can support both of us by going that route. But Kenny, it is
go to that one, studentministryconversations.org/grow. Yeah, go there, because then you'll make sure that this podcast is getting the credit for the links. And so definitely do that.
Yeah, and so we like I said, when Elle was on the show back, I think, like, gosh, dude, you're 82, I think, and Elle was episode like 20. And so since back then, we don't advertise it a ton, but we are affiliates with you guys. And so if y'all do use that link, studentministryconversations.org/grow, you get to help us both out and kind of contribute to both of these as we both move forward and press on with what we're doing. But Kenny, it's been fantastic, dude. I love your heart for ministry. I love your passion for creativity. And man, you and your wife are such a dynamic duo. And we're looking forward to seeing Grow Volume 7. That's just crazy to say, also Volume 7 of Grow. Man, we're just excited for the future. We can't wait to see what you guys come up with. And hopefully we can have you and Elle again on the show sometime.
Absolutely. And thanks for all you do. This is an awesome resource for youth pastors to learn from different people every single episode. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, until next time, we will see you guys later.
See ya.